Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Bagwindy DIY Auto. Now I have a battery light came on while I was driving. Okay guys, so the reason could be why my battery light came on and stayed on while I was driving. It could have been improper ground, the ground between the battery and the frame of the vehicle. It can also be a bad battery. It could have had a bad battery cells inside it internally, shorten out the battery. Or it can also be a broken cable from the positive end of the battery to the positive side of the alternator. Okay guys, so I am going to troubleshoot the system to see why my battery light came on and stayed on. So the first test I'm going to do is check for continuity, and then I can go ahead and check the battery power. Now the battery rating, it should anywhere between 12 volts to 12.6 volts. So let's get into it. So the tool I'm going to need here is a multimeter, a jumper, and a 10 millimeter. The 10 millimeter is to disconnect my battery, and down where the alternator is, it's a very close proximity. I don't have a lot of room, so I will have to use the jumper to connect the positive side of the alternator, that I can do a continuity check between the positive side of my battery down to the alternator to make sure that there's not a broken cable or improper connections. So let's get into that. Okay, first what I'm going to do here is check for continuity. So I'm going to turn my multimeter here to continuity. And whenever the circuit completes, you will get a beep from the meter. So let's get into that. I'm going to connect one end to the negative poles, another end to a ground. And there goes the beep. That tells me there is a complete circuit between the negative post and the frame of the vehicle. Okay, the next test I'm going to do here is check the battery volts. Now the battery is rating at 12 volts to 12.6. So let's check to see what the battery volts is. Okay, it is 12.3, which is within range right there. That means the battery is good. Okay, the next test I'm going to do here, I'm going to check continuity between the positive end of my cable and down to the positive end of the voltage of my alternator. So because it's so close down here where the positive end on the alternator is, I will have to connect a jumper down there. Here's my jumper cable, and one end is already connected down on the positive end of the alternator down here. Okay, the first test I did was check continuity between the negative post cable and ground, and the second test was checking the battery voltage, and that was good. The third test I'm going to do here is check continuity between the positive end of the cable down to the alternator. Now because it's so close down there, I have to use a jumper. The other end is connected to the positive end of the alternator, and this is the other end. So I am going to check for continuity between this end here of the battery terminal on the other end to the alternator. Okay guys, so here I go. I'm going to check continuity between the terminal end and the positive side of my battery here and down to the other end of the alternator. So this end here connected to the positive end of the alternator, and I'm checking for continuity. You should get a beep, and there's the beep, and what that tells me that there is continuity between this end and the other end. So I know there's good connections between the battery terminal down to your alternator. So I know that's good. I can reconnect my terminal end back to my battery here. So what I do know that the connection between the positive end and my alternator, I have good connections. And also I know the negative end of my battery to the frame, I have good connections. So the next step I'm going to do here is check for alternator charged. make sure that the charging alternator is charging. So what I'm looking for in this charging system, I'm looking for anywhere between 13.5 to 14 volts, and that will tell me if the alternator is charging. So I'm going to remove my jumper down from my alternator, which here's the other end. Check, make sure that my both terminal ends on my batteries are tight. Now what I can do now, or what I'm going to do here, is start the vehicle, and I'm checking for 13.5 to 14.5 volts, and that will tell me if my alternator is charging. Okay guys, this information I'm going to imply here, you find this nowhere in the owner's manual. This is just for mechanics, a little techniques that we usually use in the shops. If the alternator is charging, you can disconnect the negative post on your battery and still the engine will run without kill. If your alternator is not charging, the engine will die, and that's an indicator that there's no charging system going on. The vehicle is running on battery power only. So this is just for a little information, or this is only for reference only, guys. So let's get into it. Okay guys, so now I have continuity between my positive end and my alternator, and I have continuity between the negative post and the frame of the vehicle, and so now I can check for charge from the alternator. What I'm looking for, as I said before, is 13.5 to 14.6 voltage from the alternator. So I'm going to turn my multimeter here to DC volts. And I connect both, and I'm going to connect the positive end to the positive side of my battery post, and the negative end to the negative side of the battery post. And right now I'm only reading 11.8 volts. So right then tells me that the alternator is not giving out any voltage. This is telling me that the alternator is not charging. Okay, so I'm going to do a little test here, guys. This test I'm going to do here, you find it nowhere in the owner's manual. This is a little trick that we use in the shop when I used to work as a mechanic, working at the dealers. This is only for reference only, guys, reference only. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to disconnect the negative post, and if the engine dies, that tells me that the alternator is not charging. So here I go. This is reference only. If I disconnect the negative post and the engine dies, that tells me that the alternator is not charging. See, the engine dies. Therefore, the vehicle is running on battery power only. No power is coming out of the alternator. So we know that the alternator is shot. Okay guys, so I'm going to show you a vehicle with a good function alternator. I'm going to disconnect the negative post and the engine will still run. Okay, I'm going to start the vehicle. Okay, the vehicle is running, and I'm going to disconnect the negative battery post here, and the vehicle should continue running. Okay, the negative post is disconnected and the vehicle is still running, so that tells me that the alternator here is charging. And this is only for an example, and also this is just for reference only. Okay guys, so if you drive in your vehicle and your battery light comes on, especially at night, try your best to get to the closest mechanic or repair station, because especially at night when you have to use your headlights, the battery power goes real fast if you have no alternator charge. So this is just for information. So guys, this is the way I check, I diagnose or troubleshoot the systems, and I troubleshoot it down to the alternator. So the next video will be removing and replacing the alternator. Guys, thank you again for supporting my channel. I appreciate it very, very much. Guys, so if you haven't already, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.